Welcome to Simcast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging Informatics in Medicine.
Greetings, Simcast listeners. Today, we're chatting with three lovely ladies who happen to practice in the world of customer success management. They're very passionate about what they do, and they wanted to introduce Simcast listeners to the concept of customer success management. We start with Sylvia Devlin, who really needs no introduction, but in case you didn't know her, she is a seasoned expert in medical imaging with a career spanning over 25 years. She started as a radiology front desk clerk, very quickly developed a deep interest in imaging informatics, and eventually earning degrees in information systems and informatics education, along with her certified imaging informatics professional certification. Sylvia has made notable contributions to the field, including co-editing the Practical Imaging Informatics textbook and actively serving on multiple SIM committees. In recognition of her impact on the field, she was inducted into the SIM College of Fellows in 2023. And then the year after, she received the Dr. Ruth Dayhoff Award for Advancement of Women in Imaging Informatics. Sylvia currently serves as the Director of Customer Success at Radiology Partners and also the Treasurer of the Board of Directors for SIM. Second, we have Casey Fragione. She is a healthcare technology expert with over a decade of experience in strategic partnerships, digital transformation, and clinical workflow optimization. With a strong academic background in bioimaging, medical physics, and computational biology, she blends scientific insight with practical application, especially in emerging AI and digital health technologies. Casey has played key roles in scaling early-stage health tech companies and leading complex implementations of major healthcare systems. She currently works as a customer success manager at Siemens Healthineers, where she focuses on operationalizing digital health initiatives and promoting trustworthy, integrated solutions that enhance care and outcome. Last but not least, we have Melissa Martin, who is a seasoned healthcare leader with over 25 years experience in customer success, business strategy, and product management. She is known for her innovative customer-centric approach and has consistently delivered improved client engagement, satisfaction, and outcomes. She works at Siemens Healthineers for the past 8 years now, and she's led impactful programs that address operational needs and deliver tailored, value-driven solutions. With strong background in product lifecycle management and business process redesign and analytics, she excels at aligning business goals with client needs to foster lasting partnerships and sustainable growth. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed taping it. Thank you. Welcome, Simcast listeners. I am sitting here with Melissa, Casey, and Sylvia, three ladies who practice in the world of customer success. So, ladies, maybe you can take turns telling me a little bit about the origins of customer success in this industry.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at starting here. Customer success actually started in the software as a service industry back in the 2000s, where products were shifting from the one-time software purchases to a subscription-based revenue. So companies began to realize that they needed to continuously deliver value to retain customers and reduce customer churn. So what happened was around 2010, as the technologies evolved, tracking customer health scores and proactive engagement started to become more prevalent. And customer success continued to evolve in this industry, and a lot of other industries like healthcare took notice that being more proactive with your customers, having that customer-centric strategy, and delivering value to your customers in order to retain them and possibly even upsell to them was more cost-effective for companies than actually having customers churn.
Thank you, Sylvia. Melissa, Casey, did you want to add anything here?
The only thing that I would add here is that, absolutely on par with what Sylvia is saying, in that really it was just an acknowledgement that beyond transactional approaches, there was a need to have relationships and build those relationships as strategic partners. And that the delivery of a product and the way that it was used really needed to be centralized around clinical workflows, and the way that adoption was going to be able to move forward was really partnering with whomever that customer may be in the healthcare space. Melissa, anything from your side?
Yeah, no, again, I completely concur with the both of you. I think that, for the most part, this shift towards proactive engagement, really helped set things apart from where we were traditionally with, that original IT mindset into this new proactive engagement that would really help drive adoption for some of these SaaS offerings.
So many things that you guys are talking about were done before the idea of customer success. So I kind of have to wonder, like, how is this different than like standard customer support? What differentiates this from, before we had this term, companies would partner with, their customers to do various things, et cetera. So how does this different?
Sure. I'm happy to start with that one. So I think where this really started to differ, right, is the original approach to, or that IT mindset was all around, sort of project management, right? Really a task list. Okay, we're going to do, number one, number two, number three, the customer is going to be implemented, and then, you kind of walk away. In terms of support, it was really very break fix, right? If it wasn't broken, you weren't really engaging with the customer, right? The reactions were very reactive, and, there was really no proactive engagement. It was either firefighting, the customers, were frustrated with something, so they were calling into support, or something wasn't working. It was really focused around keeping just systems up and running. There were no metrics on, how the customer was using your product. Were they getting value from it? And in some cases, I, would dare to say that sometimes we didn't even know if the products were being used, right? We kind of lost sight of, was the application even being used, which in some cases you would not even know. Where customer success now brings in more of a customer value journey, which I think is much more effective in terms of just establishing, long-term relationships and, long-term contractual arrangements.
I could add to that from the clinical perspective, working in health systems. In the IT space, we are very task oriented. We used a ticketing system. So the customer calls the support desk, they log a ticket for us. And we were, like you said, very reactionary. We got the ticket in our queue, we solved the ticket and resolved it and moved on to the next ticket. There was never a holistic view of the customer. We were very focused on system uptime and stability, and more problem focused, I would say, than customer focused, which leads me to how we move on to the customer success mindset. And I like to pass that over to Casey to differentiate between the IT approach versus the customer success approach.
Thanks, Sylvia. So yeah, first, I'd like to acknowledge, I think, and back up a bit that in the healthcare space, customer success carries a heightened responsibility for, ethical, transparent advocacy. Our products and services, the communications we have, they impact patients and providers. And so in general, customer success, we really should foster a shared purpose mindset when collaborating with different teams. And that mindset has to be like a fundamental team alignment on patient first principles. And when I talk about patient first principles, I mean the crux of that is trust, value, and transparency, right? So building trust in the technologies we support, and we build that trust through being a strategic advisor, to our customer. And in general, the more disruptive or emerging the technology or the product is, and the more clinical teams it can potentially impact, the more trust we're going to have to be building over time. Like AI is a good example of this, right? We see that positive correlation there. And then when in terms of like value, that needs to be cumulative for a customer over time. And we do that by ensuring transparency throughout the customer journey. Some additional like action-oriented principles in customer success would be things like proactive management and optimization and continuous improvement. We really try to do that in the form of qualitative and quantitative measures, and being partnership oriented on strategic initiatives. Kind of simply, the customer success mindset is that we really want to ensure that our customers are successful, right? And that success is clearly defined within their objectives, and that we do have measurable outcomes for that.
Yeah, and in the clinical space, oftentimes our customers are our radiologists or our practice directors, and we want to make sure that we don't just solve the problem, but we try to look ahead. And like you said, Casey, we have the same approach where we try to be more proactive. If they want to, let's say they go to an annual meeting somewhere and they saw this product that was really great and they are sure that, we need to deploy it in our environment, and having that knowledge of our architecture and processes, I can provide the guidance to the radiologist that, that sounds great for that environment, but in our environment, it wouldn't work, and provide them the why. Don't just say no.
Mhm.
And they begin to trust us and look to us for that technical advisory that you spoke about. And we gain their trust, and it becomes more of a partnership, as you said, more collaborative. Melissa, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, both of you have made great points. I think one thing to add too is it really depends a little bit too on the product, right? I think there are some products that get delivered in all of these steps are the same: trust, value, transparency, proactive engagement. I think some products are more sticky than others, right? They might be embedded in a customer's workflow where, the customer, through that journey is, getting value along the way. But I think there's also, customers that may even need more handholding and more, proactive engagement if it's a product or service that's not embedded in a customer's workflow where, again, just to my previous point, where you may or may not know that the customer hasn't even, logged into your application in a certain amount of time. So I think that proactive engagement is really key, to long-term retention, success, and then growth opportunities for sure.
And I also wanted to add, besides being proactive, we are also the voice of the customer. So if our customer is having an issue with a problem, let's say they did log a ticket and they perceive it as being in the ethos and the black hole of IT. I haven't heard anything about this ticket I opened 2 days ago, and I'm really having trouble with my workflow because of this issue. Being able to lean on their customer success team to help advocate for them to their IT or whoever is so critical, because we oftentimes can drive our IT colleagues to move a little bit faster, once they understand that it is having a clinical impact. So that's also very critical for customer success.
Sylvia, you make a great point about bridging and sometimes being a translator between clinical and IT teams, right? And part of our job is being that translator. And sometimes it ties into adoption, right? Adoption is ongoing and ever present, especially with SaaS. We really have to be continuing to provide value, continuing to, help expand with use cases. And the goal of adoption is really ensuring that that value is continually derived, whether that be from the product or optimizing clinical workflows or, voice of the customer feedback to enhance R&D. All of that is hoping to lead to, that adoption and that ongoing delivery. But sometimes it does take bridging and being a translator to some of our IT and clinical teams. It's a fun place to play in.
It is, and it's ever evolving for sure.
I've got a question that goes in a slightly different direction for you ladies. I do remember when Sylvia took on her role, she was asking around to talk to other customer success managers because she wanted to kind of learn the ropes of the profession. So I was curious, other than talking to other people who do the same job as what you do, how else do you learn the trade secrets of what makes a good customer success manager?
Well, I would say having empathy for the customer. I always picture in my mind at the end of this customer, there's always a patient. But me helping the radiologist to with their workflows to get their tools, because let's face it, emergency room doctors use stethoscopes, but radiologists, they use our workstations and our monitors and our voice recognition systems. And if they're not working, they don't have the tools to practice medicine in the manner that they need to render a diagnosis. So me helping them with their workflow to be able to streamline and get that diagnosis to the patient in a timely manner is so critical to me. And I think that having that mindset helps me not just be empathetic to my customer, but also realizing that it is about patient care. Casey and Melissa, I don't know if you have anything to add from your perspective.
Yeah, Sylvia, I think I'm really aligned with you there, and I'll let you add to Melissa, but it's again tying back to those principles of trust and advocacy. And products are really tools in the hands of the people using them, and what they do with them is what's important. And we are sort of that bridge in the how, in whether it works well or it doesn't, right? And I think it stems a bit from traditional project management and account management, but there's additional components there where you are sometimes playing the role of an advocate. Sometimes you're playing the role of a expert in your technology, and other times you have to be a good listener to understand what is actually needed to translate that back to other teams. So sometimes again, you're back to that interpreter role.
That's so true.
I've got a follow-up to my follow-up, if you ladies don't mind. So part of what I was asking is, so it's great that you pointed out, empathy, trust, etc. Are there actually school programs you can attend to become a customer success manager? For example, like if I wanted to go into R&D, you go computer science school. If you want to be a project manager, you get your PMP certification. Does something like this exist for customer success managers?
I do believe they have certifications, but I don't think there is, unless Casey and Melissa, I have not encountered any kind of program.
There are certifications that are available, and I think it's also something that's emerging as this role is also changing, right? I think it's already gone through an evolution, and I think we'll see more where, previously, the thought of customer success being revenue generating was unheard of. And now there's this whole mindset shift towards, looking to customer success to be revenue generating. So I think there's a lot of shifting that's happening. And I think through that, and the more popular it becomes, we'll see more and more programs that are developed. I do know of one that is called the CCXP certification. And I don't know of many folks that have gone through that program. I am aware of it, but I don't have enough, information on it to share much more than that, but I know it does exist.
So I think another way to see this too is there are definitely formal, programs out there and certifications that would bring value. I think one of the interesting things about customer success and customer engagement is that there are various backgrounds that sort of gravitate towards this role. I can say even within the team that I work with, we have had very different backgrounds. For example, my background is actually in biomedical imaging and medical physics. And I think, my path in my career took me this way because of the informatics side, and also getting to work face to face with a lot of these physicians and, healthcare systems within the US, just like Sylvia and Melissa. So I don't know if there is necessarily a linear trajectory to the way that we ended up getting to where we are, but I do feel across the industry that the folks who tend to fill these roles are usually people who are good listeners, good translators, and have that ability to connect the principles of trust and advocacy and sort of those soft skills with a technical and or clinical background to be a good translator.
Casey, I agree with that. And we know, there's been an evolution, with our customer success team and how those backgrounds, have become more important, right? Starting off with, a group of individuals who had a certain set of skills that we, originally thought would align well with the job, but, or the role of customer success manager. But then as things evolved and our business evolved and things started to get a little more complex, we recognized the need for a little more specialization in, the clinical areas of where our products were being sold. It wasn't enough just to have, the empathy that Sylvia, talked about, or, a general IT background. It was more, we felt like we could touch our customers on a deeper level with somebody who had a deeper clinical background than we originally thought. So we did evolve in where we started to where we are today with the folks that are filling our customer success roles.
That is such a good point. Really understanding the whole picture of your practice where I work or your company, knowing who to reach out to when your customer is struggling with something and getting results for your customer because you do have that holistic knowledge is really helpful. And also understanding, in my case, the clinical. I was a radiology technologist many years ago, but I had that, boots on the ground knowledge of radiology workflow. So when I speak to my customer, I do understand what they're telling me and I have a good idea of who to go to. I may not be able to correct the issue for them, but I know who to ping if I need to.
And that's a good point, Sylvia. I think it's important for, whoever these customer engagement managers are, they have sort of, at their fingertips other resources that they can pull in. And I think that's critical to just the overall success of your customer engagement program or your customer success management program in whatever type of organization you're in, is to be able to have not only some expertise with your customer success managers, but then, those teams that are available to them to help support them in an overall like team like structure for your customers for sure.
So I want to go back a little bit. You guys have talked a lot about trust, and I believe part of that is trust in you guys as customer success representatives, but also trust in the product, as software, right? And so coming from the CAD era, I've learned do not trust the computer when it comes to mammal cat, right? Because it will flag all sorts of stuff that are completely benign, have nothing to do with anything. So as we move into the AI era, so one, we have the generation of people like myself that don't trust the computer. And then the younger generations, they trust the computers almost implicitly. And so if you guys can speak to this, is this a challenge as customer success representatives, because you're spanning various levels of technophobia or technophilia, if you will? And then how do you guys approach this so that you can bring trust in the product and be successful with things?
It's a great question. If you want, I can kick it off, ladies. One of the things I think is most interesting, and I'll stick with AI because you posed that, it's almost more about the way that it's looked at, right? We want to make sure that when we say AI, it means a lot of different things to different people, right? And from imaging and image post-processing side, ROIs and calculations and segmentation, all of those terms, those have been around in things like MATLAB for a long time, right? So understanding that doing something a bit more effectively isn't going to take somebody's job, but could potentially make it a bit easier or allow them to use their skills or work at the top of, their abilities. Framing that as a positive is helpful, but there's also the flip side of listening to, well, does this fully integrate to their workflow? Or are we creating potentially, obstacles that we didn't think of when doing this, right? I mean, does the data flow appropriately? Is there compliance issues if results are going into a PAC system? All of these ripple effects to technology are things that are important to consider, especially as a customer success manager, where you're living in the space of product and customer facing advocate. So when it comes to speaking to your audience and back to your, point of differing backgrounds and differing levels of trust for technology, the more disruptive the technology is and the more emerging it is, the more trust that's going to have to be built and the more consideration for using that technology in a way that it is aiding in a clinical setting and giving physicians and providers more confidence. Leaning into that is going to be, I think, especially important in the days to come.
Yeah, I'd like to add about that generation gap that you spoke about. It's so true. We have some radiologists that they don't trust the application. And, as their customer success advocate, I listen to their pain points and I can identify like, no, this isn't a technical issue. This is a training issue. And oftentimes I will set them up with a trainer to help them learn how to use the tool more efficiently. And they'll write me a letter afterwards saying, oh my goodness, I didn't even know half these things existed in this application. I'm so glad you set me up with that person. So being able to listen to the pain points and recognize if it is a training issue or no, this does sound like a technical, and knowing what direction to take it to get to resolution. For the CAD generation that you spoke about is very helpful in that
Well,
regard.
Sylvia, great point too. And sometimes our role isn't always having the answers or being the expert, right? It's knowing the right resources
Mm-hmm.
and how to help our customer navigate those. I mean, for us
Yeah.
in a very large, international organization, from a customer perspective, it can be quite challenging sometimes to navigate that. I mean, honestly, even for us, that's a great point to keep in mind for those of us in that space.
Definitely.
So I know we touched on this partially. I wanted to just make sure that we fully answer the question as far as the framework of customer success and if there are any key outputs or pillars. You ladies kind of touched on it on and off. I wasn't sure if that was everything or you wanted to cover more.
We could probably
yeah.
go into it a little bit more. Yeah.
Yep. Go for it, Melissa.
Do you want to start, Sylvia, with operationalizing or?
Yeah, I would love to, since I am living it right now. We just started with our customer success lane. Our customer success lane is actually an arm of IT. So we're the arm that is the customer advocate. We're the voice of the customer. And it's a total cultural shift from being that more reactive IT mindset that we spoke about earlier to transforming more to a proactive. Operationalizing is probably the first pillar that you need to get under your belt. How are we going to identify best practices and deliver them at scale and make them repeatable with efficiency? We want to make sure that our capabilities are scalable. When you have just a small subset of customers, you may do it one thing, but once your customer base starts to expand, you have to prepare for scalability. So creating standard processes, a vernacular that every customer success team member will use so that it doesn't, well, Sylvia says it this way, but her colleague says it another way, that causes confusion. So making sure that your customer success team is in lockstep as you grow together is where I am personally right now in my customer success journey towards operationalizing.
Yeah, and I can take it from there and maybe talk a little bit about, onboarding. I think this is something, I mentioned earlier when I talked about, the shift from, traditional IT, it's something, the onboarding piece of customer success is something I'm very passionate about. Having lived it firsthand, much like you, Sylvia, in starting with a product that, there was no real customer success program, there was no onboarding. The original thought was, hey, well, here's this application. It seems easy to use. It's just like an app you download on your phone. Except we were selling into large hospital systems that did not have that mindset yet of, oh, yes, I'm going to download this application into my hospital system and read this manual on how to use the product. So we developed an onboarding program that ended up really, moving us into the, next phase of really being able to operationalize customer success. And we really focused on, understanding that the onboarding really sets you up for success from the very beginning. It is your first impression with the customer. And we all know how important first impressions are. And some of the things we focused on was really, the onboarding methodology, moving away from that task-driven project management mindset, really talking about how we could deliver value, during the onboarding to avoid, implementation fatigue or an implementation that could take 6 months, 12 months, a year. That's bad for us as an organization because we're not recognizing revenue, but also very hard on the customer, right? They are, providing resources to help get things live and getting value from a system. So, having a quick time to value approach is beneficial for both you as an organization and then for your customer. And then it really sets the stage for your ongoing customer success team to take that baton from a high point of value instead of, maybe digging out of a project management implementation hole where things didn't go well or, it was taking far longer, than it really should have. So I think, onboarding is critical to really setting the stage for, a positive outcome and being able to carry that torch into customer success and creating a value journey. Casey, do you want to add, how this leads? Because once we're done with onboarding, you really go into, now driving adoption. And I know that's something you're very passionate about.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things, and hopefully this speaks to our informatics friends here and background, I'm really, passionate about people looking at customer success too, from not just a qualitative perspective, but quantitative, right? That when we say success, it can be measurable and it should be measurable. So that when we show up to meetings with our customers, whether that be, their C-suite in the hospital to show whether a program is working well, or an operational tactical meeting, that we have established KPIs, and that with those KPIs, we're proactively discussing strategies to expand utilization, whether that be expanding the solution that they already have or potentially additional solutions to support their growing workflows. So making sure that whatever decisions that we're making and when we are doing customer success, we're doing it through data, and we're making sure that what we're doing is not just repeatable, as Sylvia said, which is very important. We want to be able to scale. We also need to be able to quantify that and the impact we're making. And, that comes in different forms. Sometimes we look at that through internal ROI, right? Are we creating additional white papers? Are we working together to publish in journals, alongside each other? Are we able to have new R&D efforts from this? Or it can be external, right? Customer facing ROI triggers and defining what those look like. Were they able to deliver the 30% reduction in, turnaround time that they were looking for? Were they able to open up, additional spots for customers to get MRs that day? So there's lots of different ways, but I think quantifying is very important. And the qualitative measures and surveys, I think, are very traditional to the customer success framework. But moving into a quantitative landscape where we are able to deliver is going to be important, I think, both from a business strategy perspective, but also from an adoption perspective, to really show people the effects of their work. And then some of those other outputs, from an adoption perspective, Melissa talked about this in building advocacy, but the sum of all these customer success programs and what you really hope to get out of that is, I think, one of the best pieces of putting one in there. And that can be, that output can be the form of, documented individual customer success stories, which are pretty traditional. I did, allude to white papers and best practice guides too. But this ties back to the products or tools, right? And the how is the most interesting part, and how they're using these tools in their settings and sharing those lessons learned and being able to quantify the impact that they're making, while then tying those to macro themes like health economics, patient access, policy, any of the emerging healthcare landscape, allows those individual customers and users to be able to look at what they're doing day to day and say, wow, I didn't really realize that what I was doing when I used this technology ended up being something that was so much bigger. I was able to, expand my virtual scanning program and deliver advanced cardiac exams to these patients in rural settings, right? So when the output of all of these endeavors and all of these building, blocks come together, at the end of the day, when the customer gets to sit back and look at what they're doing and celebrate that, and then we also have the quantitative aspect to show what that success looks like, I think that really brings together what a successful program, could be, and the value of customer success.
Casey, I just want to, yes, thank you for bringing that up. Data is so critical in customer success. To be able to make those data-driven decisions is why customer success is not a cost center, but it can be viewed as a revenue-generating center in practices or organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you guys have covered a lot of things about how this all works, but if you're starting out, what should your strategy be? How do you set things up? I know Sylvia alluded to things like making sure everyone's on the same page about nomenclature, but what other things should people be on the lookout for, pitfalls or other areas they got to be careful about?
I think for me, perfection is my worst enemy because as you get more and more customers, you have to be mindful of putting out quality to your customers, but avoiding perfection because perfection will trip you up. Know that you're going to make mistakes when you first start this. I make them daily, but having the grace to forgive myself. And the customers are very, once you gain their trust and raising your hand, hey, I made a mistake on this, I misspoke, you build that trust with your customer. They know you're human. So, building the customer success framework is, as Casey and Melissa alluded to earlier, is a lot about building that relationship with your customer and ensuring or giving them the assurances that you are there to make them successful. And once they trust you in that, you are going to be great at customer success.
I think and I think I mentioned, when I was talking about onboarding, we kind of started in the middle and kind of wrapped customer success around. I think, if I was starting from scratch, I would probably do things differently. I'd really want to understand, what my goals and objectives are for my customer success management program. What am I doing it for? Am I, looking to reduce churn and increase retention or, deliver lifetime value for the customer? I think journey mapping is also critically important early on to really understand like where your touch points are with your customers. Also that onboarding process that we talked about, developing that, I think, along the way is also very important because that really sets your stage for the delivery of customer success. And then looking at metrics, right? What are your key performance indicators? Casey mentioned qualitative and quantitative. Both of those are very important. And how are you going to measure the success of your customer success program? But how are your customers measuring their success with you? And then to Sylvia's point, right? You're doing all of these things, but then you've got to be willing to gather feedback and then kind of rewrite your story, go back and scale and iterate and reiterate and maybe, be willing to change and don't necessarily assume that the first thing you put together is going to meet your needs or your customers' needs. I think be willing to change along that journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Melissa. The agility component and the ability to continue to assess where you are as the team grows is so critically important. So if I had any advice for somebody just starting this, or you're in the middle of, maybe you have 5 customer success managers and you're looking to scale that team out to 10, continually reassessing and also understanding where you sit within that customer success framework. There are customer success programs that sit within sales. There are customer success programs that sit within, more support or customer service functionality. The goals that you have internally that you set for that team need to be aligned with the reporting structure of the organization, but it also needs to be aligned with, more importantly, where your customer sees you and where your products are fitting with them. So there's different components to keep in mind, but the agility and the ability to continue to look at where you are, reassess and say, great, that was what our program looked like in year 1, but year 2 and year 3, we noticed these things and we need to change and move here, I think is incredibly important. And having the data to do that is going to make it, obviously much, much easier to do.
This is wonderful. Thank you, ladies. I'm also loving how the conversation here is flowing. I've heard you talk a lot about building advocacy, and I was wondering if you can expand a little bit more on the framework for that and the benefit of having it.
I can start from the clinical aspect, but definitely Casey's going to have more. That is her thing. But I can tell you, radiologists, clinicians, they talk to each other. And when they see customer success, when we got introduced into their practices, word of mouth went out. Like I started just with one radiologist and the practice director. And within 3 weeks, I had 8 radiologists on the call. They all heard about, this meeting is actually really productive. And having the advocacy from your customers grow in their community it's just a lot of fun as you grow your cred with your customers.
Yeah, I love that, Sylvia. And I think, when we talk about advocacies too, we really want to formalize programs and platforms that allow various groups. As you mentioned, you work, closely with physicians, techs, administrators. We want to give them the opportunity to be thought leaders and drive the industry forward, right? I mean, it's not really about the technology at the end of the day. It's about impacting patient care. And in addition to being a customer advocate and removing barriers and a lot of the, escalations that we see, one of the more rewarding parts is, and equally important, is to be an advocate when highlighting and recognizing a customer's success. So it's all wraps into advocacy. But I guess one of the best parts about that is that as a vendor, we have the privilege on this side of being an advocate for multiple healthcare systems. And it's been a really unique vantage point. And identifying individual success stories and trending those use cases and tying those to the macro themes of bridging the health economics and patient access and, emerging healthcare landscape is probably one of my favorite parts of the role. But allowing the right teams to connect and tracking and highlighting that incremental success is all part of advocacy and making sure that they truly see the impact of what they're doing and that we've got the metrics to stand behind it when they want to put their story together. Celebrating alongside of them and that part of advocacy is really great. But really, again, like having those formalized programs that allows, folks a platform for that, whether that be in the form of customer success stories, white papers, best practice guides, or empowering them for, presentations at professional societies like this one. I think that's all really important in how we work together on driving healthcare forward.
And I agree with you both. And advocacy is obviously a major component of, when we talk about customer success in that win-win strategy, with customers and, vendors or, others really, again, just really drives home how we can be successful with our customers, both as a vendor and, on the customer side, right? Each of us is successful in our own way. And that's a testament to just how customer success can be such a positive thing for our customers.
Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you guys so much for your time and your expertise on the subject. Before we close out, do you guys have any thoughts about anything that we might not have covered or anything else that you want to make sure that people understand about this idea and why it's so important?
Yeah, from the clinical perspective, I can tell you that customer success in imaging informatics is emerging. I'm starting to hear of it popping up at not only private practices, but also academic. So be on the lookout and, find out if your organization is interested in customer success. I would encourage you to look into it. It's been highly successful in my practice. And if you have any questions, we're all here for you.
Same. Yeah. From a vendor perspective, it's, not necessarily new, but constantly evolving. So again, Sylvia, great point. If anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
No, thank you for this was a great opportunity. I'm really happy to connect with everybody and end it with customer success managers love data too. So we are very excited to become a part of this community and thank you for the opportunity to engage with your audience.
Absolutely.
Thank you as well. Simcast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine. Please visit our website at siim.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at sim_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.